Welcome back, chillers.
Hooray!
I'm Alex.
And I'm Amber.
And this is the season 2 finale of True Crime and Chill. So, first off, welcome back. Second off, I'm putting this in here. We really appreciate you guys being patient with us because for the first time in 2 seasons, we actually had technical difficulties that stopped us from putting an episode out on Tuesday instead of, just personal life stuff. So hey, it's been 2 seasons. We haven't had a technical difficulty yet, so woohoo. But just in case you guys didn't know, this is the second half of our season finale. We will be coming back in August. So don't worry, we're just taking a month. Yeah, it's August. July. Oh, I just totally skipped June. We will be coming back in July. We're just taking a month off so that way we can kind of recuperate, get some things done that we need to get done. Amber can have a whole month dedicated to planning her wedding that's happening in August. So, because she's upgrading her last name. But I'm super excited to bring you this second half, and I'm super excited to bring you a season 3. So go us. But in case you guys have not listened to our first half of the episode, go ahead and go listen to it. We dropped it last week. It'll kind of catch you up, but we did cover the stories of Lavinia Johnson and Vanessa Guillen, 2 women who died while in service to the military. To recap, both had reported sexual assault at some level, and both died under circumstances that were considered mysterious and yet not yet given the level of severity it deserved.
If you're interested in hearing about those cases and haven't yet, you can check out the first part of our Murder in the Military episodes on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts.
You can also find it on our website, truecrimeandchill.com.
This week, we're going to tell you the stories and discuss 2 other cases that fall under similar circumstances, Tina Priest and Kamisha Block. Before I get into these 2 additional cases, I think it's important to let you know that not only are these 4 of many cases that are like this, but women are not the only victims.
Yeah, no, there are reports of other soldiers, including men, who have reported sexual abuse of some kind, and not all of them make it out to tell their stories in person.
I think it's also important that we start by letting you know that we are both victims of sexual assault of some kind and also have friends who have been victims, and that's part of why these cases are so important. Alex's story revolved around her time in the military specifically, and mine around a poor choice in a relationship. Therefore, these cases matter as much to us as they do to the families of the victims, and we feel it's important to share these stories, though. Again, these are just a few of the many, and we are appalled at the way it's been handled in the past.
When I decided to do this case, do this topic for a case and stuff, it was really, really hard for me to narrow it down to just 4 cases. Not because there were just other ones out there that probably needed more things. It was because there were so many of them.
Yeah.
So many cases, and some of them weren't even had anything to do with the military, but still, a lot of them, especially in the military, there were so many cases, and there were more cases than what needed to happen.
Right.
And stuff. It was just absolutely appalling and stuff. And so having to narrow it down to just these 4 cases, I want everybody to know, and everybody who's listening, and maybe families who have had their soldiers or their seamen or their airmen pass away under mysterious circumstances, in addition to filing a sexual assault report or afraid to file a sexual assault report like Vanessa, I want them to know that just because we haven't told your person's story directly, we're still representing your person by telling these other stories and getting people talking. Because the more people talk about Lavinia and Vanessa and Tina and Kamisha, the more people who talk about these girls, the more people are going to start looking. And the more people who start looking, the more cases that are going to be brought up. The more cases that are brought up, the more people that we can eventually see be brought to justice. Mm-hmm. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's what really needs to happen. And it's not just a thing where the military is like, oh yeah, we're totally going to do this to fix it and everything. And, bring out the SHARP programs for the sexual assault prevention stuff, and bring out all these other things to help lower sexual assault in the military, when in reality, they're just slapping a Band-Aid on something that needs to be addressed head on. And you guys will see a lot of this in this episode. And if you watched or listened to the last episode, you heard a lot of my opinions about it as well. And so I really hope that whoever is listening to this, these 4 women get you to start digging, and eventually it can reach somebody that can actually do something about it.
And for the record, there is actually a podcast that's Murder in the Military. So it focuses on these cases and more. So
yes, if you ever need a good podcast to listen to, and I highly, 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 highly recommend them. I've listened to them a few times actually, and this is one of the reasons why I got the idea to do just this episode and stuff. And whereas we only have 2 episodes dedicated to this, they have seasons and stuff. And so they have more information, they have more dedication, they have more time, they have more resources and everything. So I do highly suggest that you guys check them out. We will have them in our credits and stuff, so that way they can just kind of like, you guys can see and everything, because it needs to get out there. More of these stories need to get out there, and they definitely have more of them than what we can fit in 2 episodes.
Right. So I do have some context here. According to an article by the Los Angeles Times on March 8th of 2009, of the 115 female service member deaths in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, 16 of those have been ruled suicides. Overall, 205 of the 4,868 military deaths in those wars through January 31st were ruled as suicides. The 128 reported Army suicides in 2008 were the most in 1 year since the Pentagon began keeping track of suicides in 1980.
The whole 115 female service member deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan, 16 had to have been ruled suicide. What really sucks is because that article came out in 2009. Mm-hmm. What really sucks is that Tina's and Lavinia's are probably reported in those deaths as suicides. And that's what sucks, is because it's like, you're telling me 16 of those 115 female service members all just killed themselves. And I'm not saying that it's not possible. When you deploy, I've never deployed, because when I joined the military, it was at a time where we weren't rapid. It really depended on the base that you were going to, was with your rapid deployment. And out of Hawaii, unless you were infantry, there really wasn't any rapid deployment and stuff. And so I have never been deployed, but I have been with people who have, and I have been with people who were deployed in the early 2000s and stuff. And it was a completely different situation than what you see now. And and people would come back, and they were different, because you could see things over there. And I remember somebody telling me, he was like, when you go over and you see a kid the same age as your son with a bomb strapped to his chest, and the only thing that you can do is take him out, otherwise he's going to kill you and everybody else. He's like, that messes with you. It does. And it does mess with you. And the thing is suicide is a huge issue in the military between both men and women. Yep. And the VA needs to for a country that says they care so much about their military, they really don't. And I'm just going to say it. They really don't. For a country that says they care so much about their military, that they love their military, and yay veterans, and respect the flag and everything, we don't care about our military. If we did, we would help military. We would help homeless veterans on the street. We would help women who were saying that they were sexually assaulted and believing them, because yes, there is that tiny, 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 tiny percent that lie about it. But you're really going to take that tiny, tiny percent and then ignore everybody else. We need to start having better resources for our veterans. We need to start having better resources for our military members. And we'll get into this a little bit later with Kamisha's story and everything, but we need to start protecting our veterans and our active duty soldiers a lot more than we actually are right now. We as a country need to step up and stop doing that. We need to stop saying that we care about them and start showing that we care about them.
So there's a lot to unpack coming up. So let's get into it. Starting with the story of Tina Priest. Tina Priest was a 20-year-old from Smithville, Texas. She was certified as a medical assistant and decided to join the Army shortly after. She served as an Army private first class on a military base known as Camp Taji in Iraq. And she was assigned to the 5th Support Battalion, 1st Brigade Combat Team, 4th Infantry Division in, ta-da, Fort Hood, Texas.
Nice to see you again, Fort Hood.
So her mom said that she was shy and a follower. And a lot of followers tend to do well in the military, so I can understand why she'd want to join. Also, they have great resources for getting into top medical programs in the civilian world. And I honestly believe it's a good way to go to grow your medical career, because I do have cousins who that's how they advanced in their medical careers. They started in the military doing medical.
Oh yeah, because if you join the military, and that's one of the huge ways like people like join. That's one of the huge reasons why people join. You get free schooling, and that's free schooling anywhere. And if you do a full contract, your schooling is paid for. And then there's all these grants and all these scholarships and all this other stuff out there for active duty military. And when colleges hear that you're active duty military, they have all this extra stuff for you and stuff. So it's a really good thing to be able to go in and do that, because you can also take classes for free in the military. Like you don't have to use any of your actual GI Bill money and stuff like that. You can take classes for free in the military, so somebody can join and spend like 4 years of spend all 4 years of their contract getting their associates, and then when they get out, they can use their GI Bill for like their bachelor's or like their master's or whatever else they want to use it for and stuff like that. So it is a really good thing to go do if you can, because not everybody can join the military and stuff. And so
I'm not eligible. I never was.
Yeah, they disqualify you for just about anything, and that's what sucks and stuff. And so, but the only thing I have an issue with is like the schooling for it, because, for example, a surgical technician, somebody who helps out in surgery, it's a 19-week course, 10 weeks like in a classroom and 9 weeks on hand, and then you're done.
They fast track you, yeah. So yeah, you're eligible to go out in the field.
Yeah, that is a 4-year course in the civilian world, and let me tell you, I've done the 68 Delta course. It is hard. Like, you can start with a class of like 100, and maybe 35 of those will graduate, right? Because it's hard because they fast track you. And yeah. So, I mean, if you're really dedicated about it, it's a good thing to go into when you're doing military. The only thing is like, it's just, you gotta be dedicated with it.
On February 15th of 2006, Tina accused a fellow soldier of sexually assaulting her. She called home saying she had been raped and that no one was going to believe her. She underwent medical examinations, but they were inconclusive of an assault. On February 27th, she was deemed stable with no risk management issues and was prescribed 48 hours of rest due to exhaustion by an Army clinical psychologist. On March 1st, 2 weeks after reporting her sexual assault, Tina Priest was found dead in her room. She had died of an M16 gunshot wound to her chest, and the Army ruled the death as a suicide.
So let's just talk about this for a second, okay? 2 days before her death, she's deemed stable with no risk management issues, and just go on 48-hour watch. Like, I have seen people get admitted for like less things, so it's like, okay, if she was really suicidal, why didn't that psychiatrist be like, hey, you need to we need to do something about this. 2 days later, all of a sudden she's dead. And I'm sorry, but if you're suicidal, you often do it to get it done. A shot to the chest, yes, it can kill you depending on where you do it, but you have a higher probability of survival because, like, unlike with just like shooting yourself in the head, like, you're done. It's whatever, unless you're like one of those miracle few that like you blow half your face off and manage to survive. But like, usually when you do it in the chest, like, there's a higher chance of survival because there's a higher chance that somebody hears the gunshot, comes running, sees you, saves you, and goes on from there and stuff. Right. Like, if she really just wanted it done, then she probably would just shot herself in the head. Plus, it's been proven that women are less likely to use guns to kill themselves because it makes a mess.
Yeah, I guess. Well, no, so my son's librarian, that's how she killed herself.
Oh my God, that's dark as hell. But, I mean, unless it's really the only thing that they have available. Like, usually when women try to kill themselves, they usually do, like, pills or, like, you know, the exhaust in the car, stuff like that. They usually try to do things that aren't, like, very messy. Unless that's the only thing they have. So, I get it if that was the only thing. But again, if she wanted to kill herself, why not just shoot herself in the head?
Right. Well, Tina's family disputed the Army's suicide claim from the start. They wanted to know how their petite, 5-foot-tall daughter physically shot herself with the M16 rifle with her short arm length. Because if you don't know, an M16 is not a small gun. It's quite large. And the Army claimed that Tina used her toe to pull the trigger to kill herself.
I'm sorry, but I've shot one of those. You don't have enough strength in your toe to do that.
Not just that, but again, if she wanted to kill herself, it would be why would she?
Why go through so much trouble?
Precisely.
Like, what?
Right. Well, and here's the kicker, though. The Army also claimed that Tina was suicidal and had trouble coping with her assault.
So then why did you let her go? Oh my God.
Right. Joy Priest, Tina's mother, said that the two spoke on the phone and exchanged emails frequently after her assault, and that, if anything, she was angry, but not suicidal.
Which is like warranted. Like, obviously she was angry because nobody was freaking taking her seriously. Right. But like, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of signs that somebody could be suicidal without anybody knowing. Yeah. Like, there are plenty of signs that people don't look for, and sometimes it just comes out of nowhere, and it does. Sometimes it's like, and then you look back on it and you're like, why didn't we see any of the signs? There were subtle signs, but not like huge signs and stuff. So like sometimes, like, yes, somebody could be suicidal and you just not realize it. But the thing is if she talked to people and the psychologist saw her, like, that's the thing. And a huge issue is, yeah, the psychologist said she was stable. And like, she was probably mad because when this happens in the military, we are told, this is before the SHARP program happened and everything. This is before, oh, you can come talk to us and tell us and we'll help you out and everything. This is before restricted and unrestricted reporting, which the difference between the two basically is like you make an anonymous report or it becomes public. So restricted and non-restricted reporting now in the military, if you want to report a sexual assault but you don't want your name out there with it, you can make an anonymous report about it. Now, if it goes to trial, then you have to like have a thing and stuff. You have to it has to come out that it's you and stuff. But they didn't have this back then. So it really wouldn't surprise me if she tried to tell somebody and they're basically like, well, are you sure you want to do this to their career? Are you sure you weren't just, giving him the wrong signals, or making them jump through all these freaking hoops just to come back and be like, oh, we demoted him and gave him a decrease in pay and we just switched him to a different unit. But it's not difficult to get angry when you're trying to do something and they basically just say, well, that sucks. Because they do.
To add to all of that, it took the Army almost 6 months to provide Tina's family with investigative documents. And then, of course it did. And then 9 more months for them to release photos of the autopsy and the death scene. Tina's mother is quoted in the Los Angeles Times as saying, quote, "They have you jump through hoops and then they back you up and make you jump through more. It's just so painful, just mind-bending," end quote. Chris Gray, Chief of Public Affairs for the CID and, going back to the first episode, the lead investigating body on Lavinia Johnson's case. He says, quote, "Some families have a very difficult time believing a loved one would do this. Other journalists have been turned off by the very complete and thorough criminal investigation we underwent," end quote.
They never investigated her death as a homicide, only a suicide.
Right. Yeah, this particular case, they only ever investigated it as suicide and not as homicide. And so, to add to all of this, rape charges against the soldier who Tina accused of raping her were dropped a few short weeks after her death, even though his sperm was found on her sleeping bag. He was convicted of failure to obey an order and sentenced to forfeiture of, drumroll, $714 for 2 months and 30 days restriction to the base and 45 days of extra duty.
Well, because they can't really convict him based on a dead girl's word. Like, just saying. That's... And the thing is, like, even if Tina hadn't, quote unquote, killed herself, and I say that because that's the official story, but that still probably would have been the outcome as well. He would have been moved. He probably would have just been moved to a different unit and had all this stuff happen to him. But it's not going to stop him from doing it in the future. And it's like they could sit there and probably be like, "Oh, well, yeah, his semen was on her suitcase. I mean, on her
sleeping bag.
Her semen was on her sleeping bag, but she probably, like, they probably had sex and she probably just regretted it afterwards because that's what happens."
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Tina Priest's case is no longer under investigation by the Army, but her family is still fighting for the truth. With her toe.
I can't. Because it's like you sit there, right? And you sit there and it's like, when you join the military as a girl, okay, from the moment you, like, enter, people look at you and they look at you different. And I understand that's how it is in the real world as well and everything, but, like, the military has always been the good old boys club, if you know what I mean. Like, oh, it's always been run by men. Oh, men have always done this. Military, women were freaking nurses for the longest time. That's all they could join the military as. Nurses for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
Now everybody's like, oh, you can't see women in combat, blah, 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 and everything. And they try to come up with super dumb excuses on why women can't be in combat. They menstruate. They're emotional, blah, 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 and everything. And it's like, I'm sorry. I went through basic training with I think she was 33, 34, with a 34-year-old woman, okay? She bested the boys in their PT scores. She bested the drill sergeants in their PT scores. Yeah. Like, this woman was freaking incredible. And I was like, you know what? Put her in a combat position. If she wants to be in a combat position, put her in a combat position. The ones who want to be in a combat position are the ones who are working for it. And if they can do it on the same level as the guys, which a lot of them can, then that's great for them. I have a friend who is currently in the Marine Corps right now who is, for lack of a better word, she's a freaking badass. Yeah. Like, she's a badass and everything. And I'm just like, these women are like setting, like, goals and stuff like that. But then the second one of them comes forward and says, yes, I was sexually assaulted, all of a sudden it's, well, how do we know you're not telling? How do we know you're not lying? How do we know you weren't drinking that night? What were you wearing? Well, you're always hanging around these guys. Sometimes that's all your friends. When you're in a unit with mostly guys, sometimes you become friends with those guys and you hang out with them and shit. Like, that doesn't mean that you're up to something. And even if they were, who cares? They are all consenting adults until it comes to a time when somebody doesn't consent, and then all of a sudden everything blows up in their face. And this even happens to men. You sit there and you listen to men and everything, and men go, yeah, no, I was sexually... Like, they'll say a story, and you look at them and you go, honey, no, you were sexually assaulted. Mm-hmm. And they'll be like, wait, seriously? And you're like, yeah. Did you want to have sex with her? Did you want her to do that? Well, no. Then you were sexually assaulted. Well, my friend said, your friends are wrong. So when stuff like this, like with Vanessa and Lavinia and Tina and stuff, like, when stuff like this happens, it's like, it's a really sad thing because, like I said, the military should be better about all this, and it's not. It's definitely not. And it's 2021, and it's still not any better. It took a girl dying from Fort Hood and her family raising hell for all of this to start coming to the forefront. Mm-hmm. And if you looked at all of the hashtags for I am Vanessa Guillen, like, there's so many stories. So many. And it's so sad because it's like nobody ever does anything about them. Makes me angry.
All right. Well, next, let's look at the story of Kamisha Block. On August 17th of 2007, 20-year-old Kamisha's parents received news that their daughter had died from friendly fire in Iraq, a single shot to the chest. While that alone is startling and sad, they had no reason to dispute it because it happens, a stray bullet, or you could have been mistaken as an enemy. Like there's many reasons that friendly fire happens. Okay. There was really no reason to dispute this. However, when they received her casket 6 months later and opened it, they saw she had a shot to the head, which is very different than what they were told. So in order to tell that story, we have to start from the beginning. Now, Kamisha Block enlisted in the Army in July of 2005. And in December of 2006, she was sent to, once again, Fort Hood in Texas.
Fort Hood, you're really not looking good.
That's where friends said she caught the eye of Paul Brandon Norris. Most people called him Brandon, despite his name being Paul. Yeah. Some people go by their middle names, I guess. Yeah. It was obvious, says Joel Hastings, a fellow soldier. It was obvious they were in a relationship when they were stateside. He was a staff sergeant, Brandon was, and Kamisha was a specialist. His higher rank meant the two couldn't date, a rule they clearly ignored. It's kind of like, a CEO and a secretary in a way, right? Like trying to put it in context for those who don't know a lot about the military. Rankings matter, just like they do in a lot of companies, where a manager really shouldn't be dating somebody who's not in management, right? Norris was also married, but he was separated, something that we discussed in the previous episode as being grounds for reprimand. Joel says, he was my squad leader. It was obvious to me. It was obvious to the other team leaders. So clearly they weren't trying too hard to hide it.
Yeah. So, like Amber said, their relationship was already a no-go from the beginning. If you guys are in separate units and you are a sergeant or a staff sergeant dating a specialist, that's one thing. If you guys are married, that's one thing. Like, you could be two separate ranks and be married and stuff. But when you guys are in the same unit especially, it could be seen as favoritism. People could look at it and be like, well, he's giving her this job because it's an easier job, so he's showing favoritism and all this stuff or whatever. So people could look at it as like a favoritism type thing. But I mean, if he had been in a different unit, then maybe like it would have been okay. However, the fact that he was also married, until you are divorced, until those divorce papers are signed, doesn't matter if your spouse is living in a completely different state, pregnant with some other dude's baby, or all this other stuff or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. You are still legally married to that person until the papers are signed. So if you start dating somebody else before those papers are signed, you can get an Article 15 for it. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think it's dumb. A lot of people do. But it happens. And it honestly just depends on the unit you're into, because depending on the unit, you would have to like catch them like mid-action with the videotape recorder and stuff and like show that as evidence. Otherwise, it's just like, oh, well, it's just your word against theirs and stuff. So, but the fact that they basically were like flaunting it in front of everybody shows that, one, the unit probably didn't care as much as they should, and two, they just didn't care. Like, Kamisha and Brandon probably just didn't care at all.
Right. 6 months later, in May of 2007, Kamisha was deployed to Camp Liberty in Iraq. Brandon followed a little over a month later in the second half of June. Kamisha's sister, Shanta, said while Kamisha was abroad, her phone calls to home took a dark turn, saying things like, quote, "If something were to happen to me, you make sure that you take care of mom because you're the strong one," end quote. However, to me, that doesn't really necessarily strike me as odd when she's off abroad fighting in a war. Like, yeah, I hear that maybe she's going out on dangerous missions and she's worried she might not make it back.
Yeah, they had us do wills and basic training. Like,
yeah, I mean, you're fighting in a war. Like, yeah. And Kamisha's sister says that though while in Iraq, the relationship between Brandon and Kamisha quickly became unpredictable, and Brandon seemed to want out.
I mean, he could have been like feeling pressure from higher ups, or he could have been realizing that this wasn't a good decision. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, there's no way of like knowing why he was thinking that.
Right. Well, and again, like we talked about with Tina, like when you go over there, things change. Like you start seeing things
Yeah,
differently.
no,
So he could have
you,
just decided, maybe I don't want to be in a relationship. Maybe he decided he wanted to go back to his wife. I mean, there's any number of things that it could have been.
yeah.
Although many soldiers did report a rough relationship between the couple. About a month before Kamisha's death, Joel Hastings spoke up about it, and he says, "I'm not good at keeping my mouth shut. That's when I went to the chain of command. I used the open door policy and spoke to the first sergeant and the company commander at the time." Alex, can you tell us about the open door policy? Because a lot of people probably don't know necessarily what that is.
So basically, open door policy is like, so when you have an issue, you have to go up your chain of command. So you have your squad leader, your platoon leader, your first sergeant, and then your commander and higher ups and lieutenant, all that stuff or whatever. So technically, if you have an issue, you're supposed to go to your squad leader. If your squad leader can't handle it, then your squad leader goes to your platoon leader. And if your platoon leader can't handle it, up and up and up and up
Right.
it goes.
Basic chain of
Some
command.
people do not have faith in their squad leaders or platoon leaders, which is honestly understandable. And some people feel like they can't trust their squad leader or platoon leader with what they need to say. Some people feel like it'll sweep them under the rug, or it has something to do with their squad leader or platoon leader themselves, so they can't really go to them and talk with them about it. So what they do is the commander and first sergeants have open door policies, which is if you have an issue that you are afraid to go talk to your squad leader or platoon leader, or you think that they cannot help you out with this issue, you can come to us. Now, this isn't something like, oh, my car registration needs to be redone. What do I need to do? This is like, hey, I'm getting like harassed by this person in my platoon. I don't want to go to my squad leader or my platoon leader because they're friends with them. What do I do? Like, this is that kind of stuff. Like, you can't just like, hey, like, so and so is a dick just because. Like, you got to have like, it's got to be an important reason. So it's just basically following a chain of command thing. It's kind of like in your job where you talk to like your team manager, and then your team manager can go to like their manager, and their manager can go to like the business stuff like that. So
when 12 News out of Southeast Texas asked Joel Hastings if action was taken, he said, "Yeah, there was action to sweep it under the rug. They just kind of blew everything off and explained to them that they had a no contact order. It obviously wasn't working." But apparently, Joel wasn't the only one to come forward. Others described an increasingly toxic relationship, and they questioned Brandon's stability. One of the soldiers who came forward is now retired from the military and agreed to answer questions from the same news channel, 12 News.
Notice how they're retired, which is probably why the only reason they decided to say something.
Right. He says he was Brandon's direct supervisor. He's quoted as saying, "Kamisha sat in my office with another lieutenant and was given every opportunity to tell us the truth. They chose to hide it." So, in other words, Kamisha had the ability to speak about the relationship, that they were in one, that he was, being weird. Even though it was not okay on multiple levels, she had the opportunity. They also were counseled on ending the relationship, which means their superiors were like, "End it now." If not because of Brandon's apparently deteriorating mental state, at least due to the large amount of rules they were breaking. But for just 1 second, let's talk about how when you're 20, do you really ever listen to anybody about things? No. How much trouble do we all get into at 20?
Well, okay, but Kamisha was 20 years old, like you said.
Yeah.
Brandon was 30 years old when he died, which means that
he was 30.
Yeah, he was 30. He was 10 years older than her. Okay. There were already reports of him losing it while he was over there. I'm sorry, and the chain of command, they probably did not handle this in the way that it was handled. They probably were like, you guys have to have a no contact order. They probably tried to paint the blame on both of them, which is understandable because you both are consenting adults and everything. But the thing is that Brandon was being abusive, which honestly wouldn't surprise me if he was at least being verbally abusive or emotionally abusive. If Brandon was being abusive in any way towards Kamisha, then
we're going to get
she
into
would
that
want
in a
to come
second.
forward and tell them. She would want to come forward and tell them, because if they're acting like this with her right now, instead of just being like, because like the guy who came forward who was retired, saying she sat in my office with another lieutenant and was given every opportunity to tell us the truth. Okay, so was she given every opportunity to tell the truth, or were you guys trying to get her to say something? And it was like, if like she thought that if she said something, she would get in trouble, because more than likely Brandon got into her head and said, if you say something about us, then I'm gonna lose my rank, and you're gonna get in trouble too.
Yeah.
So instead of being like, you know what, yes, we did have a relationship, it's getting bad, I don't know what to do, which is another huge issue in the military, is domestic assault is in the military as well. And like, instead of being able to come forward and be like, hey, it's getting bad, I don't know what to do, she was probably so scared, because again, she's 20 years old. This is her first deployment. This is her first unit. And if she didn't have anybody to help her, then she wouldn't know like what she could do at the time to help get out of that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it could be oh yeah, you know, she's 20 years old, who's really going to listen to that and everything, but it could also be she was probably scared if he was already losing his mind over there. So
the morning of Kamisha's death, Brandon was prohibited from going out on a mission. Another soldier, David Womack, came forward with an important memory about the morning of Kamisha's death. He says, Norris was having some kind of issue that day. I don't know what it was. I can't remember if it was mental health or physical. The lieutenant had to physically hold him back and said, you aren't going. You are not right. End quote. Kamisha went out on the mission because they're in the same squadron. Later, the mission group returned, including Kamisha, and things took a violent turn. Now, other soldiers who knew them said that Brandon wasn't, up to that point, violent physically with her, but he was physical with her. Many of them feared one day he would snap and hit her. Unfortunately, when he did snap, it was much worse than that. After their return, Brandon entered Kamisha's housing unit and ordered her roommate to leave. This is according to a law enforcement report. The roommate's name was redacted from the report summarizing the shooting, but she was identified in a 2009 article in Maxim magazine as specialist Danielle Jennings. She left, but opened the door when she heard gunshots. Brandon pointed his pistol at Danielle, but then turned his gun and shot himself in the head. Not in the chest, folks. In the head. He'd already shot Kamisha 5 times in the chest and head, the report stated. Kamisha's sister, Shanta, says he shot her in every main organ, and then, he put the gun to his head. And the thing I don't understand, the command knew about it. Brandon was going crazy, and they knew about it. He needed help also. End quote. A written statement from a medic on the scene describes the life-saving measures performed on Kamisha, but that Brandon was immediately presumed dead.
So we're just going to back up. If he was freaking out in the beginning, they should have put him in a secure hold with no access to weapons, nothing. Mm-hmm. The reason why he had a firearm was because he was military police. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the only reason. They should have taken away his gun, and they should have put him in a secure hold so he couldn't hurt himself or anybody else. But they didn't. Nope. When Kamisha got back, they should have done something to kind of protect her, I guess. Well, not necessarily protect her, but they should have done something to separate both of them.
Well,
and instead they basically let him walk into her housing unit and shoot her.
Right.
And from different articles that I have read, especially with Brandon's family going, oh, he could never do this, somebody was there as a witness saying that this is something that happened. Yeah. And there was an article that I read where basically his wife is talking to the person doing the article and stuff. And she said, like, the last time she spoke with him was a few days before he died. And he told her, make sure Bella knows who her father is. Yeah. So
yeah, but you got Kamisha's calls home were dark too.
Yeah, but the thing is 2 days before he dies, he tells his wife, make sure Bella, his daughter, knows who her father is.
Right.
And it's like
The thing is,
I sit there and I wonder,
how realistic is it that they would know that this is what he was going to do? Like, let's start with how realistic is it? It's not.
I feel like maybe Brandon. I feel like the thing is though Brandon started losing it.
He did
a long time ago, and again, the military didn't take it seriously because they never do.
And that's where the
Mental health issues are a huge thing in the military. I have friends who have secret clearances who are afraid to go to mental health because if they get diagnosed with depression or anxiety, that they could lose their secret clearance because of that, which is crap.
Yeah, then they lose
honestly.
their job
you shouldn't have to be afraid of losing your job in the military just because you have issues that almost everybody in this world has. Like the military preaches about mental health and how they want to help you and everything and how they want to make sure their soldiers are ready. But yet when their soldiers come forward and say, hey, we need help, it's, oh, well, if you do this, you might lose your job. Oh, well, if we have to put you on medication, then that could affect your security clearance. Like, it's crap. It is crap. And the thing is, I'm not saying that what Brandon did to Kamisha is correct. No. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is it probably could have been prevented if the military had actually done something to step in when they noticed Brandon going off the rails. Because it wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't just that one outburst that he had. There were multiple people coming forward and saying, he is freaking losing it. He is freaking losing it.
And if nothing else, if despite how this ended and everything else, he's supposed to be a leader. And you can't effectively lead if you're losing it. So they should have at least given him, like, I don't know, a week break or a chance to go home and come back or something. Something that would kind of give him a reset at the very least. Instead, they were just like, you're not going on this mission, but keep doing everything else.
Yeah.
Like, if you can't go on the mission...
But that's the thing. That's how it is in the military.
Right.
They will push you. Yeah. They will push you until you have nothing left. Right. And then when you're sitting there asking them for help, they go, oh, sorry, we didn't see it before.
Right. Kamisha's case was reopened in August of 2018. Army Criminal Investigation Command, or CID, reopened the case after receiving an allegation that an individual had been ordered to destroy medical records related to the murder-suicide investigation, says, oh, look again, Chris Gray, spokesperson for the command.
Chris, you're not looking so good, man.
After an investigation into possible misconduct, he said, quote, no credible information was found to substantiate the allegations, end quote, and the case was closed again in the spring of 2020. It's important to point out that this collateral investigation, regardless of the outcome, would not have changed the findings of the murder-suicide in the original death investigation, Gray said. The family has used every avenue that they could to gather information and determine why the soldiers were allowed to continue to interact despite previous counseling from the chain of command to end the relationship. Shanta says she said that she's never found the Army to be honest about the circumstances preceding the shooting, nor willing to hold accountable the leadership that she believes is responsible for not protecting her sister. And here's where it is for me on this one. It's not okay that they lied about her death. It's not okay that they didn't take Brandon's weapon or at least give him space from everybody when he was behaving the way that he was. But Alex, you and I both know that anyone, especially those 20 years old, when they're told they shouldn't do something, they want to do it more, especially a relationship.
I mean, but I get that. But at the same time, it is the military's job to protect their people. Period. End of story. Nothing else. It is the military's job to protect their people. And if they get multiple reports, because they can't say that this was just a one-time, they can't say that this was just an out of the blue thing.
There were multiple reports about Brandon.
They've been getting multiple reports about Brandon. They have been getting multiple reports about the severity of the relationship. They've been getting multiple reports about all of this. And they just basically turned a blind eye. And all of their research and all of their findings and all of their stuff, like every time something like this happens, it's always something, they always come back with something to try and save their own ass with it. And that's the issue. And you saw it, you see it a lot with the Vanessa Guillen case. Mm-hmm. Like, you see it so much with the Vanessa Guillen case where Like, they're basically covering their own butts. Like, people were like, oh, like, the military was like, oh, well, we're going to fire the post commander. Okay, what is that going to do? What is that going to do? Firing the post commander, that's not going to do anything. Oh, well, we're going to remove some of the people in her chain of command. Again, what is that going to do?
Right.
The guy is already dead.
Yeah.
Vanessa is already dead. Like, that's not going to do anything. How about you fix the problem at the source? How about you start offering better mental health, like, situations to your soldiers? How about you stop ostracizing them because they have mental health issues? You cannot join the military and not leave with any mental health issues. It is almost impossible for that to happen. Because PTSD doesn't always come from you getting deployed. And the fact that there's such a high chance, there's a higher probability, what's really sad, there's a higher probability of somebody being sexually harassed or assaulted in the military than there's for them being deployed right now. And that is sad. And I say someone because it happens to both men and women. Unfortunately, men just don't come forward about it more because society has trained them not to. And it's sad. And, like, yes, Brandon killed Kamisha. And honestly, I would not blame her family if they never forgave him for that. Because that is completely within their right.
They don't have to. Yeah.
That is completely within their right to not forgive him. However, if I was Brandon's family, I would be so pissed at the military right now. Because not only did they not help Brandon, they swept it under the rug until he finally exploded and ended up killing himself and another person. Right. Well, and that's not okay. It's never okay to take somebody else's life. It's never okay to do that. But at the same time, I wonder if maybe the outcome could have been different if they would have taken his issues a little bit more seriously.
Well, and it says a lot that they lied to Kamisha's family.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's the biggest red flag of all. They knew that they did something wrong, or they wouldn't have had to lie about it.
Yeah.
So, Kamisha's case is less suspicious than some of the other ones we've discussed, and many of the ones we didn't. Though the lies, again, don't make a whole lot of sense. Kamisha's sister, I think, says it best when it comes to any and all of these suspicious deaths and allegations swept under the rug by the military. She says, quote, "No matter how old a case is or the color of your skin, the system is supposed to be fair and just. Yet, it is broken."
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Chill. For more information, including case notes, photos, and sources, please visit our website at truecrimeandchill.com. You can also stay connected with us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Look for new episodes from us each week on Tuesday.